folks are coming in. Let us know where you're joining us from.
I can't hear it. Is it on?
Gotcha.
Oh,
There we go.
Does you do or does you don't? Will you will or will you won't? Hang around and play around with me. Does you do or does you don't? Will you will or will
San
you
Francisco,
won't? Be
thanks
my
in
pal
California. If you're watching them, or if you're on Facebook, let us know where you're joining us from. Thank you. Welcome, welcome. We'll go ahead and start because we have a lot to cover today. As usual, Los Angeles, hello. Okay, all right. Welcome to Museum of the African Diaspora's Art as We See It. My name is Today, and I'm here with my colleagues and friends, Dimitri, Remy, Charlie, and Rodney. MoAD's physical building is currently closed, but you can still get your fill of art and artists in the African diaspora through our online programs. Check out our website. Every other Thursday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we invite you to join us as we look at art with you with curiosity and wonder. Today, we present delicious pairings of jazz rhythms and textile designs. We bring you selected textile of the African diaspora found in digital public archives, and we have matched each piece with a jazz beat of its own. We invite you to join our conversation via chat as we discuss movements, color, patterns, rhythms that embody the distinct experimental quality of jazz. If you're joining us on Facebook, please leave a comment and we'll jump in and out of Zoom to check on you. Before we start, we'll take a deep breath in and deep breath out. And let's have a moment of silence as we stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter and honor the lives we've lost due to police brutality. Thank you. Also, as many of us are settler, immigrants, or descendants of those forcibly brought to this continent, our institutions are founded upon exclusions and erasures of the indigenous peoples whose land we are located. With deep respect, MoAD acknowledges that even in virtual space, our people, our work, and our network servers are on native lands, and thank the indigenous people of the Bay Area who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Thanks again for joining us. And it's without a doubt that American textile art and music are evocative of influence of their African roots. So today we bring you textile designs from United States, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Ethiopia, Algeria, Benin, Mali, Sudan, Sierra Leone, and Ghana. As we look at each item, we acknowledge and deeply honor the known and the unknown makers of the art, the hours upon hours of creative work they have poured into their work. We also honor and respect the spiritual properties and cultural significance of each piece that each piece may embody. Well, we have many scrumptious patterns to paired with full body jazz rhythms. So let's get to it. A woman made utility quilts as fast as she could so her family wouldn't freeze. And she made them as beautiful as she could so her heart wouldn't break. Mary Lee Bandolph, a quilter from G Bend, Alabama. A woman made utility quilts as fast as she could so her Jazz is a very democratic musical form. It comes out of a communal experience. We take our respective instruments and collectively create a thing of beauty. Max Roach. All right, let's look at this piece and let's listen to the music. It's about 30-second long that we've paired it with, and Dimitri will lead us into the discussion after we listen to the music. And look at that art.
I love that track. So awesome. So thank you for allowing me to talk about this piece. I just think it's one of the most gorgeous things I've ever seen in my life. It is a Kusaibi gown from Sierra Leone, also known as a Mandingo garment, um, from the Mende people. And I don't know, just besides the aesthetics of this piece, and I guess I can kind of start off by talking about the aesthetics of it. It is made of 18 strips that are dyed in indigo. So as you look, the vertical stripes are the strips, and they're all sewn together. Darker indigo, lighter indigo, and in the center, around, this is actually a bubu. So a bubu um, is the name that they call what the elites wear throughout West Africa. And I think Nigeria has the most famous bubus, kind of in the world. And it's a men's garment actually. I thought this was a women's garment initially, but it's a bubu that is splayed out, and so it's a very non-form fitting top. And so you see the little white square, that's actually where the head goes through and the arms go out, on the side. And so the patterning on it is, all of the red is red imported felt. And then the rest of the designs that you see in the center are all embroidery. The the designs in the felt, there's right towards the center, there's these five squares that are interlocking, one in the middle and then four on either side of that. That's believed to be inspired by the Hamsa, the evil eye design, and is to ward off evil spirits, and serves as a form of protection for the wearer. And then if you look through the different motifs, there's other squares, there's irregular lines and circular patterns throughout it, and then there's these fans on the end. The curators are not quite sure exactly what those represent, but we can start to think of our own ideas of what this, and like, what does a fan mean? And keeping in mind that these are worn by the elites. Um, and what else do I have to say about this? There's I think the maker, really brilliantly. There's these tassels that you see on the bottom, right here, the little white tassels, and they're brilliantly right at the point where the two strips meet, where they're sewn together. All the embroidery, all the sewing on here is all done by hand. There's no machine work in here at all. So especially when I look at the center and I see these swirly patterns that are interlaced together, I just, just the time, the effort, the attention that someone had to do, the precision to be able to hand sew such a design. Now we have design, we have machines that, you can feed in the pattern and the machine does all the work and it does it really rapidly. But, someone being able to do this by hand, like, I really want to touch this and feel it. And this garment comes from the mid 19th century, so it's about 150 years old at this point, heading toward 150 to 200 years at this point. I guess we're like deep into 2021. So just thinking about that craftsmanship and how this thing lives, and it looks so contemporary to me. I don't know, what do folks think about the motifs on here, what they could possibly mean, or represent?
Well, I do want to say I really enjoyed the pairing of this with the music, and that music is really dominated by the bass line. And for some reason, these dark lines make me think of that.
And those white horizontal lines could almost look like musical clefs. You know, there's not enough lines. There should be 5, but you know, it almost gives you that sense. So I love the kind of musical imagery that it can evoke as well.
I can't look at this without looking at modern day denim and the relationship between, the denim, the dark denim wash that we wear and the light denim wash. And, for me, when I see the light denim look of the indigo, it reminds me of the 70s. And so there's something about evocative for me about this, colors and stuff, and the boldness of the colors against the blues that does that for me as well. So yeah, I love this piece too, Dimitri. It is one of my favorites. I'm like,
you know what, Remy? I'm so glad you mentioned denim. Sorry, you were going to say something, Dimitri.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm glad Remy mentioned denim, because we crossed over to Atlantic, and here we are. And the same kind of the thread also, that was just it's a brilliant piece. And music, almost forgot about the music. I'm so used to doing it without the music. Yeah, what do folks think about this?
Well, Joan Rosenberg is loving it.
Yeah.
Just wrote that. One of the things I love the pairing of that music in particular with this, because you hear a muted trumpet, and at the same time we're seeing these muted blue colors. It's a really nice musical pairing.
Yeah, it made me feel this kind of dreamy, relaxed feeling, and it makes me wonder at that, that's when artists are in that process of where you hit the kind of meditation, where you hit your zone as an artist, where you just are one with it and your art process. And then I also wondered what it would be like to sleep under this quilt and just be embraced by it with these colors, because
Maybe you'd have that same feeling from the Miles Davis selection we just heard. It seems like a really comforting musical selection. And you're right, like these quilts were really designed to provide comfort to people who lived in a world that often was very uncomfortable for them.
Go ahead, Dimitri.
We're talking at the same time. But I just love that you paired this right after the mid 19th century indigo. And when we think of indigo, when we think of as Remy was talking about blue jeans, we don't often think about that connection to indigo and the West African continent, and the reason that indigo was so became blue jeans becomes this thing in America. It's like we hear the story of it being Irish workers, but a lot of West Africans were brought to this continent too because of their skill and their knowledge of growing indigo and dyeing fabrics. And so I just think it's really a creolized art form that oftentimes the African gets left out of.
And I was just gonna add to that as well, is that we do also see indigo throughout Japan as well. And so that connection with, the indigo of West Africa, Mali, and, many other parts of Africa, but also as it's as it shows up in Asia.
Yeah, I just want to riff a little bit off of what you said earlier, Remy, about how, you'd be underneath this quilt and comforted by this quilt. And I can imagine being a child and just like running my fingers over each of those knots, and the kinds of games that you would be playing in the dark with yourself with these little dots, that you of knot, that you'd be playing with. I love that idea that you said about being under this quilt,
Mm.
Yeah, we have a comment about someone in the audience who lost one of their professors, and he loved Miles Davis, and just really she enjoyed hearing that. I'm a big Miles Davis fan myself. I was a trumpet player, and he was just such a master. Got to see him once, luckily.
Oh, you're so lucky. Well, also, Miles Davis, which is across his profession, kind of listening to his music, is toward toward the end, his music became so different, much more experimental, and it's such a pleasure to just kind of follow his life in parallel with his music. I really like that. Also, what's more American than blue jeans and jazz? So this,
Right.
yeah. The next piece.
Yeah, so this one, well, we'll hear our music first.
Okay.
So this is a work, we actually don't know the identity of the artist, and it's an African American artist from Gee's Bend, Alabama, or actually there's a quote from a woman from Gee's Bend, so we think it may be related to that. I do want to point out I am wearing my Giants cap, which of course today is Willie Mays' 90th birthday, and he grew up near Gee's Bend. He probably grew up seeing quilts like this. But this one, what I really loved reading about it was that we think the makers of these used fabrics from family members who, they were maybe done with clothes, and then they would sew these things into the quilts. And so it's almost like a document of the life of a family, the life of a community. But that doesn't explain the pattern. And I was going to ask you guys, like, what do you think these shapes suggest? Where does this take you?
Well, whenever I see any kind of like triangles or triangular patterns, which I do in this one, I'm always back to Egypt and the pyramids, and I just go home. You know what I'm saying? It's like that's what it does. But I think also what I really liked about this one and the previous one and the first one is all of these palettes of blue that we've been seeing, and these blue palettes. And again, for me, blue, that takes me into Yamaya. Again, it takes me back home to Africa. It takes me to the ocean, but it also takes me to the sky as well. So.
Oh, I love that. I love that as like the Egyptians of the great celebrants of the triangle, right?
Right.
I'm going to read something from Facebook. Our friend Lucretia says, and she was talking, Yeah, hi Lucretia. She was talking about the last piece, but I think it applies to this one as well, that it reminds her of bed covers that her grandmother had and the music
Mm.
right along with that feeling.
Hmm.
And
And
do we
did
I
get a,
you,
just, I just, yeah. Sorry, Charlie, go ahead.
oh, that's okay. So, for me, you guys are seeing the triangular shapes, especially with the Mary Lou Williams music in the background. I'm seeing a keyboard.
Hmm.
For me,
Oh,
it's almost like I see, the sharps and flats. The shapes of the keys, the blackness of the keys are different than the whites of the keys. And I can almost imagine even like a 2-level organ keyboard. Something like that. That's where my mind goes when I see this. Probably because of the musical pairing.
And I wanted to just add that while Charlie was talking about that, where that took my mind was just thinking about the blanket itself and the function of a blanket, and just in as much as, it's the first thing that we wrap our children in once, it to comfort them. As a baby, we're often wrapped in this blanket, and how much comfort that having a blanket, it's still something that we give to people to help comfort them and keep them warm. But also just in terms of this being like a memory cloth as well, in terms of not necessarily a painted picture of a memory as sometimes in West African memory cloth, but also having the essence of family members and the vibration that's held in the piece of cloth as you sew it and interweave to keep your family together, to keep your family close. And so another way of being able to bring your ancestors and your family members and your kinfolk with you, and especially if you're having to travel somewhere, this blanket might be something you could take, whereas yeah, sometimes the families were split up.
that's
I think,
beautifully said.
I think also just kind of like I want to bring it back to what Charlie said, just thinking, when you said it, reminds you of the piano keys. And I just started thinking about the essence of jazz and improvisation. And, then I start to think about how this was pieced together and the improvisation of this, and how it's such a departure from, traditional European American traditions where there's a lot of symmetry, there's a very distinct patterning that you create, where this maker just went way off. And and the way that this is so improvised really reminds me of, it makes it feel contemporary. It's from 1940s, but it seems like it could easily be an art piece from 2021 with and just the process of piecing together. I remember my elders and my family piecing together quilts, and how you have to put the pieces together. So just trying to imagine what that was like on this large piece, again, without the use, well, maybe with a sewing machine, but maybe not without one.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by in the far left column, those kind of lighter shaded squares. I think those are really intriguing.
yeah. I also just noticed those. I mean, if you spend time with it, there are many little details that you can take out of it, and just the triangles. Again, I'm looking at them differently. Um, the really symmetrical triangles that are sewn in. I really like them. Well, if you like triangles, here we go.
Well, I just want to start out by saying that I really loved the musical selection. Sade deserves the credit. She picked that, and it's an Ethiopian musician I'd never heard of before, Wow, I am definitely going to listen to more of, I hope I'm saying the name right, Yèkèrmo. So, am I close?
Yeah, Yèkèrmo. Yep.
I'll go ahead and put that in chat, and I'm definitely going to be looking
Thanks,
for
Ryan.
music from that artist. But yeah, I think especially when we zoom out, I'm really intrigued by the image, and again, the color choices of this piece. And then when you zoom in, you see those little details which kind of pop out. I was going to ask you guys, what do the shapes that we're looking at suggest to you? Does it make you think of, is it representing something in real life, or is it just kind of a really cool pattern?
Well, Rodney, it's really interesting because Rodney and I were at the Picasso Calder exhibit yesterday, where we were talking about how, you can take art sort of to the next dimension by including movement. That's what was so important about Calder, is that he was able to get, mobiles that moved. And when you look, especially when you pan out on this particular piece, it really has a kinetic quality to it. It's kind of like those mind-bending puzzles that you used to do as a kid, where you kind of move the book back and forth and then it starts to spin on its own. So for me, this really has a rotatory component to it. So, I love the fact that this is so pleasing on my eye. I love the fact that, again, it has those knots in it that I would love to just be able to put my hand on top of it. And yet it's also including another sensation, this sensation of motion and movement, because you have this very solid frame with this very kinetic center. I love this piece.
Yeah, this is another one of my favorite pieces. And I think for me, this one, I feel like I'm looking up at the sky. And again, with the triangles, it's like how those triangles then turn into a circle. This whole has a cosmological feel to me. And I think the little, I think, Dimitri, you might have been talking about, or maybe it was today when we were looking at this before, talking about these little, I call them tufting, but the little catches of yarn, which is the yellow pieces that connects the backing to the front of the quilt. And so, to have the presence of mind, and not only the presence of mind, but the patience to hand tack all of those pieces in this to me, when I look at it, I see a spiral. So yeah.
Yeah, what about the color choices too? Like, do we get a mood from this?
I love all of these color choices of the blue. I mean, that to me, I know in terms of color theory, we often talk about blue as being a cool color, but for some reason with this palette and the others with the grays and the creams, there's something comforting and something warming to this. So this is when, for me, blue doesn't necessarily, it kind of breaks the rule of being a cool color for me.
It's a vibrant.
It's
blue,
cool,
right?
as in American it's cool, but not cool as in it's cold and chilly.
Yeah, and Sarah says it reminds her of the seashore.
So those are it's like waves.
Yeah, or
nice.
shells, or who knows what. Yeah, nice. It's a nice.
There's also something about this one with these fabric choices, and we've done so much looking at the fabrics of the time. And for this one, oftentimes the quilts are, you collect, clothing from family members and they get incorporated. This one, it's like such nice fabric, and it's also consistent, with the polka dots and the lines. So I wonder the sourcing, like did the maker, which I'm assuming is a woman, go and specifically get this fabric for to make this quilt, or did they just have very consistent choices in what they liked, for all their family members' clothing.
I do like the idea of it being family members' clothing.
Mm-hmm.
That this is like a document, and if you were a member of that family, you would know, like, oh yeah, this is something that Aunt Sue used to wear, or this is something that my brother like wore out or something.
And you would always know where to look when your clothes went missing.
Yes.
I mean, this is
Sorry, Charlie.
Today, I cut you off last time. Your turn.
Okay, thanks. Am I the only one who sees an eyeball? Like it's an eye.
Oh,
I see an
Okay.
eye. I see the eye.
Okay.
The original James Bond opening, Yeah. But
It's
for
an
me,
eye. It's an eye.
I like this idea that this is sort of like the original found art. I mean, I think found art is something that, we make such a big deal of in the 20th and 21st century. But here, I mean, it's the same idea, is that, you're using what you have in front of you. And so, if Joe's shirt doesn't, has a tear in it, well, it doesn't mean you throw Joe's shirt out. Joe's shirt becomes part of this quilt. And so I like that idea of you use what you have, and you don't waste what you have.
Well, in terms of collecting fabric or selecting fabric, I think this next one is going to take you to a different level because it's just so many pieces. But let's see. Let's see what the music pairing of this one. Thanks, Rodney, for putting this on there. What do folks think of
it's another brilliant pairing. You must be good with food and wine too, Sade, right? This is brilliant.
Thanks.
So we were talking about found material, and I just loved reading that this is from flour sacks. That's where the source material came from, or in it. Let me make sure it's got a backing and so yeah, cotton with flour sack backing actually. And again, I think we have a really interesting selection of colors in this. So I want to ask you to think about like what's the color palette telling you, and then does this represent something in real life, or is it just an abstract? And I see Carissa says the fabric reminds me of pajamas in the 1940s and 50s.
Oh, that was
That's the last one.
Slide, Rodney. Yeah.
We'll give you guys a little more time to take this in. But yeah, what do you guys think?
So he was commenting on that it reminded her of the pajamas of the 40s, but it's of the previous
previous one.
material. No.
This one for me, I'm like, how do you piece this together? How?
That was another question I had, is like what was how did you do this?
I think what strikes me about this one is how tiny the pieces look as well. I mean, if anybody has sewn anything by hand, when these are often cotton, so therefore the edges can fray. So that again, just handling your materials and how you handle your materials and stitch them together, because these pieces really look really quite small. So the intricacy, I think, in the overall busyness, I think the intricacy can get lost in looking at this piece. And then the other thing with this piece, as Sade makes it grow, and so we can all have a acid trip with no acid, is when I look at this piece, I feel like I'm looking from above, and I'm looking down again at the pyramids as well. Like it's got this pyramid shape to it. And so yeah, I'm just fascinated by the sizes of in this particular one of these tiny pieces of fabric.
And again, for me, it's kinetic. You really see movement in here. And I think that whoever made the quilt, you know, has like these two distinct tonal palettes, you know, like the top triangle and bottom triangle have this very sharp, bright coloration, whereas the left panel and the right panel, right, the left triangle, the right triangle are more muted. And so by doing that, your eye really moves around a lot. And I think that that's really, it's just great use of color, shape, design.
Yeah, we have this, it's untitled, and I think when we look at it, at the title that it's been given, Housetop Pattern, that might have come from, is that from the museum, from a curator, or is that, do we know if the maker wanted it to have that association?
That's an interesting mention, Rardine. It's oftentimes we kind of have to improvise on the title of these pieces from the archives, actually, and we don't necessarily know the maker or if they, you know, how it was supposed to be displayed or anything like that. And it's not always explained. So that's interesting that you mentioned that. I'm happy that you mentioned it, actually. I'm also, I'm just wondering, oh yeah, Sarah says, and the few pieces are zebra colored. That's what I was gonna say, is that the pattern within patterns. So each piece, we can spend so much time if we slice this into 4 pieces or even more, we can spend so much time looking at them and looking at the patterns within the pattern and what is next to the red piece, what is next to it, and is there, you know, do they complement each other just on a micro kind of level? And so I enjoy this piece.
And there's a nice comment, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name. Lucarisa, I hope I'm saying that right, says that the music was so on point because it has these quick notes, right? And it correlates with these small pieces, which again, she says are so precise. You know, this is one of the things that we talked about too when we were trying to come up with the music with this, you know, is that you do have that real kind of staccato of Coltrane saxophone, you know, that is a little bit, you know, like you think of that more muted Miles Davis with that blue piece. It's a really, really different mood than this one. So again, nice pairings today.
Thanks.
Sarah says she sees the letter P in the center.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can't unsee it. Thanks,
Yeah.
Sarah.
Oh, I do want to point out one more thing about this, which is we kind of see the triangles, but this is also a series of squares.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like this.
Oh yeah.
This little triangle and square in concert with one another.
Mm-hmm.
Art Blakey. All right.
All right.
And
I think this one's mine. Is that right? So
It's somebody's. I don't have my list.
Go,
It's not mine.
go ahead, Charlie.
It is yours, Charlie.
You feel inspired?
I call it mine. But you know, this is what they call a railroading pattern of quilting. And again, I love the pairing of that music. You know, we have this really, really percussive music. And for me, I almost see a series of wooden wind chimes. You know, you can almost you know, hear that kind of sort of unpredictable noise, you know, sound coming from these wind chimes. And again, you look at all the different colors, patterns that this quilter has chosen to use. And so, you know, you know, that idea of visual cacophony, right? That not only do you have, you know, noise that doesn't fit nicely, clearly into a pattern. Here you have something visual that doesn't fit nicely, clearly into a pattern. And, you know, it just makes me wonder at the kind of time and effort to put this together like that. You know, my wife is a quilter, and so, you know, I know how she does these larger pieces, and to see this person taking these much smaller pieces and, you know, and hand sewing. And, you know, my wife cheats; she uses a sewing machine, but, you know, this person, you know, did it by hand, and, you know, I just imagine this person with bloody fingers at the end of this piece. It's again, it's cacophonous to me. It's visually cacophonous. You know, it's like I can hear different noises, different sounds, and different patterns.
Yeah, Charlie, I don't think you should be putting your wife's business out like that. But anyway, that's. Just say it. But for me, just coming back to this piece, what I see is the railroad tracks, and I hear the clanking of the railroad tracks in the piece, but also like with the music underpinning it, and you know, just makes me reflect on African Americans building the railway lines here in the United States. And so, you know, I wonder if this is the story of part of the story of the actual railroad, the building of the railroad tracks.
I think, I like the thinking about the railroad tracks. For me, it immediately evokes the Great Migration. So, you know, the 1930s and 40s is when African Americans are, you know, moving from the deep South to the North, to Chicago, Detroit, you know, and like so many of us, my family in the 40s, you know, moves out west to California. And so the railroad becomes, you know, thinking about, you know, the original underground railroad, but then this physical railroad becomes this portal to these new opportunities in these new worlds. And so, you know, just thinking about the time that this was made also makes me think of that journey that was happening of millions migrating at this time.
And you know, it's great you mentioned the Great Migration, because it does make us think of Jacob Lawrence's migration series. It's the palette isn't exactly the same, but it's in the same mood to me.
Yeah, and this is just brilliant. It reminds me, I know we've said it, this reminds me of so many artists, and I won't name them all, but you know, definitely Radcliffe Bailey is someone who comes to me, and there's something about the subtle use of the red. You know, the red just pops up in just the right precise location that makes me think of, you know, this is definitely a museum piece.
Well, yeah. This music, I would love to hear what folks think of it.
Man and woman were created to live for eternity. But an apple they ate from the tree of hate, so you know damn well they went to hell. Yes, they did. They went to hell. Some say that hell is below us.
Yeah, what did folks think of that?
Well, Sherry sure loves it. She loves Nina Simone, and actually got to meet Nina Simone in Jamaica.
Oh, wow. See, I'm jealous again. It was Miles Davis earlier with Ronnie, now that's great. You know, and this piece is, we know the maker, thank goodness, and we are still on this side of the Atlantic, and Harriet Powers is the quilter. She's she's from Clark County, Georgia, and she made this quilt she made quilts at about 1886, and she exhibited it at Athens Cotton Fair of 1886. And you know, this is a depiction of Bible stories, and I don't know exactly. There's her. We can even get her photo, which is amazing to me to see her photo with quilted apron on, if you notice. And in this piece, you can see, if you cut each segment, if you take each segment out, you can see a Bible story, kind of the more known of Adam and Eve. In the first one, you can see that the snake used to have the legs, and then you move around, and to the very last one, when you look down on the right side of this, the right side, you will see the bottom one is the crucifixion, which took me a while to kind of figure out that it's the crucifixion and the rise of, or the rise of Jesus Christ, and then he's amongst the heavens. I'm not quite sure what's going on in some of these pieces, in some of these parts, but I can, from what I remember from my Catholic school upbringing, there's John the Baptist baptizing Jesus, and one of them where you see the dove coming down, which I have never seen it. I have never seen the dove portrayed as brown, which makes me feel kind of nice. It's a nice way of looking at that dove. I've always seen it as white. And the angels speaking with John the Baptist, Jesus being born in the manger. So yeah, this is kind of, it's kind of like watching a film. Yeah. Lucretia said, okay, this is just random thought, but the lyrics took me to Genesis in the Bible, where the naming animals. Yeah, it does.
She's invited to our next presentation then, right, today, to the panel.
Please join us. Come. And so, yeah. And the fact that these are separate stories, the Old Testament and the New Testament kind of put together with this storytelling, with I just find it so fascinating. And
I think also just adding into that, is often strikes me as we look at the different pieces of art, and particularly here it's much more overt, but how African and Black spirituality expresses itself in the art, whether it's more overt as like this in Bible stories, or some of the other artists that we've looked at where they're sculpting pieces of angels or something like that. So I think, again, our relationship, whether it be, indigos and the story of the cosmology in terms of or whether it be something like this, is that being a really important part of self-expression through artistic endeavor. And the thing about art the practice of art taking so long, and the relationship between art practice and meditation, and that also being like a form of prayer.
She was hesitant about, not hesitant, she did not want to sell her quilts, and due to financial hardship, also encouraged by her husband, and that's when she started selling it, because that tells me that these are sacred pieces. These are sacred pieces to her.
I may be the only one seeing this, but it does look a little bit like the Smithsonian logo in some of the bottom panels. So like she was way ahead of her time.
Yeah.
Well, we might ask them where they got their logo from.
Yes.
Just saying, girl, get your money.
But the other thing we should mention is that, we just recently had sort of a film club on the Bill Traylor Chasing Ghosts movie, which I think all of us would highly recommend. It's really wonderful. Yeah. You see this quilt, right? Isn't this the one that's
we see, we see this quilt. Yeah, and in that one, Remy, also when we were watching the movie and looking at this, you mentioned that the sculptor, I'm forgetting his name right now.
Edmund, we did a whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't remember his last name.
Edmondson.
Yeah.
Yes.
Edmondson. Yeah.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, thanks. Just these kind of figures, and this applique technique, we can also, now we're ready to cross over to the continent, and we start to see it. So let's see what music we chose for this one. And if y'all agree.
Yeah, how can you not love Fela?
Zombie.
Yeah, I love this piece, even though it's so, and I guess I love dark art also. So the subject matter is definitely not on the light side of things. This is from the king. Actually, at the time, it was the kingdom of Dahomey. When this was depicted. So it depicts King Glele as he is defeating the Yoruba. And so the Yoruba folks are the ones who are lightly clothed, just wearing bottom garments, I guess, and are being decapitated and dismembered and all kinds of things going on with them, which obviously is a statement because if we know about the Yoruba people, this is not, they're not walking around in just undergarments, I guess. So even the depiction of his enemies, he's kind of like downgrading them, and so we'll just talk about this piece. It's an applique piece, which you'll see these banners all over West Africa, like even in Ghana. The Asafo flags will be made out of made with applique cotton fabric put together. But in Benin, these really hold this huge that serve this huge role. And so King Glele, the central figure, is actually depicted as a Vodun god. So they decided to take him away from his human form and depict him as something supernatural, the supernatural being. And it's even believed that sometimes these sculptures of these spirits, these Vodun spirits, would be stand-ins for the king. When the king is off traveling, they would sit on the throne, or they would stand in his place at an important meeting. And so it's believed that this banner could have possibly served a similar function. They don't really know. I want to definitely get into King Glele because I did a little bit of a deep dive into this guy. And
Go ahead, Dimitri.
He was so interesting. He succeeded his father and ruled until the day that he died. And it's believed that he may have committed suicide before the French came and conquered Benin and colonized it. So literally the day that that they landed, he mysteriously dies. But anyway, like after during this time in the late 19th century, France had made the slave trade illegal. And then started to roll that out to all their colonies. Well, this guy decided that he liked slavery, and so he continued to have enslaved Africans in Benin within his kingdom. Some of them from neighboring, nations like Nigeria, which wasn't Nigeria at the time, but from Yoruba land. And so it's just such an interesting guy. And so I really see this as a propaganda piece as well. So he's depicting himself as a spirit, as someone with these unearthly powers, and his enemies are slightly subhuman. So kind of an early political poster.
And a warning that what will happen to you if you are from Yoruba land as well.
Yeah.
Which I am, so
Well, apparently he conquered everyone all the way up. Like he tried to conquer. He tried to go all the way across West Africa and kind of slowly capture everyone, which he was pretty successful at.
Well, since we're on the theme of war. How about this next piece? We'll explain why. Let us know what you think. Yeah, this piece. What do you think it is? What's the function?
It's almost to me like a sculpture.
Yeah.
You know, it's a fabric sculpture of an animal. But maybe, I don't know, would it be a supernatural animal? Or, you know, it's obviously like no animal we've ever seen in our lives. And there's your triangles again, Remy.
Yes, and Sherry says a costume. Is it a costume?
Makes me think of the Nick Cave, some of his work.
The
Yeah.
soundproofs, you know.
Well, it's a horse armor. It's from Sudan, and it's a quilt. It's a horse armor with. It's between 1881 and 1898, so that's a big span. So it was made around that time of the national movement led by Muhammad Ahmed al-Mahdi against the Turiya, which led to the capture of Khartoum in 1886. And so this piece it's supposed to be protective also because it has wool in it, and wool is known to be protective. It's also it says not unlike a medieval European horse armor. Yes, Carol, definitely. And also for this piece, what I want to kind of point out is it's to kind of we went back and forth about, is it protecting the horse? Is it to signal the horse? Because you can see it from far away. When what's the function of it? And also, you know, the quilt work in this one is so symmetrical and so patterned. And I wonder about the color choices, why these colors were chosen for this piece. So if folks have thoughts, I would love to hear them.
I wonder what it looks like in motion. You know, like, does it make a warrior look more terrifying? Yeah. I'm not going to mess with somebody on something like that.
Right. And you know, I think it also talks to me when I think about this, it talks to me about the relationship, the sacred relationship between the warrior and his horse, and the unity, because you know, if that is what's carrying you into battle, there's, you know, and I think I've never been a horse person per se, but the people who I know around horses, you know, that relationship of oneness when you are with the animal that you have to trust, you know, that you have to, there is, you know, you cannot just dominate the horse. You have to have this give and take relationship. And again, I think for me, again, it's about not only the protectiveness and, you know, the curiosity in my mind is like, to what end somebody is going to not only create this protective horse blanket and shield, but you know, that means there's a great love and a great appreciation, because quilting's, you know, most of us can't even stitch our own clothes together, so let alone, you know, imagine having to stitch a blanket to cover your car, you know. Which, you know, so anyway, before I go off on a tangent.
No.
I think also for me it's just like, you know, when we were talking, I mean, I definitely don't know about this, but you know, particularly in this part of the world, metal smithing is an ancient art form, and so you know, so they could have made this out of metal, which probably would be awful in the searing, desert heat, but of Sudan. But I think there's also something to this serving a spiritual protection for the horse, as opposed to being strictly for deflecting. I guess it was 19th century. So yeah, bullets or arrows or daggers or whatever you may have, like that it could have served to protect the horse, spiritually, but also from the sun if you're going to be in
Mhm.
direct heat, so that they don't get sunburnt.
Yeah, this to me really looks ceremonial, more than protective as in from armor. I mean, I can't imagine someone really going into battle with this, but it still looks really, it looks really beautiful. It looks like it would certainly make you stand out in a field of horses, as we often are in a field of horses, aren't we? I think it's it's a nice piece from that.
I definitely see the Nick Cave piece, one of his. I could just see him doing something like this. I'm
That's a great
thinking
pickup,
about
Rodney.
that. Yeah.
And I feel like even at the head, with where the black triangle and the blue triangle, for me, I feel like I see the horse's eye there
Mm.
as well in those triangles.
I want to read the comment from Sarah. She says in the middle section, you could see the energy pulsing between the front legs and the hind legs.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very energetic.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great
Yeah.
comment.
And that green, that random green there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Dimitri, this is your piece, and let's listen to the song, the music.
I think Charlie's got this.
So again, I love the pairing here, with the very subdued piano, and then you have these very, very subdued earthy tones. And this is mud cloth, so this is a special technique where they would soak the fabric in these leaves for a prolonged period of time, and then they would create. Dimitri is saying Kuba. That's the name of the Kuba cloth is what it's called, and then they would create these various patterns. And, for me, I just love the fact that not only do you have what look like almost Moorish patterns in it, but when you look up close, it to me, it almost looks like snake skin, like, parts of these, they look like interweaving snakes, especially it's almost like you can feel the sort of reptilian skin as part of the pattern. And I think it's it just feels very desert, when I see this, the color scheme, the feel of it, it has heat to it, it has warmth, it's a really interesting piece. Other thoughts?
I one of the things about Kuba cloth that just really resonates with me, that I love, I'm always like really interested in how in especially West Africa, gendered roles of fabric making are so different than the West. And so with Kuba cloth, it's the men who do all the weaving of, so it's made out of raffia. So they'll gather raffia and they'll weave it together, and that's the work of the men. And then the women do all the finishing to create the final patterns with it. And that, Remy likes to talk about that, kind of the spiritual nature of, divine masculinity and divine femininity. And, with this sacred cloth, it's the two of those energies and forces coming together to make something really beautiful. And, we see Kuba cloth, like, in the Bay Area, it's in most Pete's, they have it in a frame and whatever, but originally it's made for an individual. A lot of care and attention goes into this, and the patterns have a spiritual meaning behind them. We don't know you know, because we're not part of this. It's an encoded language, you know, to the Congo people that, you know, unless you're part of the culture, you don't know what the meaning is. But, you know, it's like that idea of this pulsating and this snake skin and this movement. And, you know, I think we can start to get into what the meaning could be without ever actually fully accessing it because it's not for us.
It's captivating, you know, and I think that's a great point, Dimitri, that it just, we don't even know why it draws us in, but it does.
For me, what's interesting is that, you know, I suspect that, if we could just go back for just 1 second, you know, I suspect that, you know, when it was first made, it was uniform in its color. You know, over the years, it has now taken this very, like some of it looks more worn than other parts of it, you know, either through sun damage or just damage of use. And so to me, I really like that right now. And I probably like it the way it is now more than I would have liked it when it was brand new, if that makes sense.
So it's aged well. May we all be so lucky.
Yes, right. I think this is Remy.
Oh, no.
I got this one.
Okay.
Dimitri.
Okay, that is the jam.
Herbie
That is the jam. I don't want that one to end. So this one is a piece of Bogolonfini mud cloth, and as you can see behind me, I love this stuff. And it comes from the Bamana people in Mali, and this is an exceptional piece that we have here. So yeah, how mud cloth is made or something like this is that they would first take these strips of cotton that are woven together, and then they would dye them yellow, and then the rest of the colors are actually different colors of mud from rivers found all over Mali. So you get different colors from different rivers, and so they'll meticulously paint that on to get these patterns. And that's why I think this one is just insane. Like how do you get these, you know, these fine lines? And the really thin lines are actually called the cricket's legs. I don't know what the spiritual significance of that is, but there is a spiritual significance. And oftentimes these are the designs are made by women, and these are turned into garments for men that again, it kind of reminds me of the love letter beads from South Africa, where there's an encoded message for your loved one that only they know what the meaning is behind it. And so that's where, if you look really closely, you'll see that some of the lines and some of the forms are broken up, and those broken up things are done really intentional. And where the pattern and the shapes are broken from their uniformity, that's where the message lies. And that, for me, is just this really sweet concept. They then take an caustic material, sorry, not encaustic, to remove the mud, and then it's washed in the same river where the mud came from to get it off. And so just thinking about that whole process is like, how do you get these lines so fine and so precise? I'm obsessed with it.
And it really does look like, you know, something like a code that you would make, you know, so that idea of these embedded messages for someone makes complete sense when looking at that. Of course, we don't have access to what that key would be, you know, to the code, but it really is amazing.
When women start to codify things, better watch out.
Well, I would ask, where do you think Morse code came from?
There you go.
Just a question.
Ooh. Remy, I hope you approve of the music on this one.
I love the music on that one, and I think
because your initial one was
you know, but also what has strikes me again, as well as, you know, as we've gone through this process to put these pieces together and all the work that you've done, is really how also the music then adds another layer, and the music being part of the soundtracks to our lives now, you know, as whatever music we listen to. And for me, this one, it's really interesting with this piece of music. It added a whole different moodiness to it, and so I started to see more of the blue pieces, and I started to see them as people this time. And so prior to this, I had seen this as maybe an abacus with all of these, you know, circles and you know, putting them in. But then I suddenly saw this almost like people in a confined space looking out of windows or looking out of something, these faces. So it just in terms of changing the music and looking at it again, this time I see way more red than I've seen before in this as well. And once again, I love those little, I call them tufty things, the little red catches of cotton that you see is on the blue, but is really highlighted on the cream color pieces as well. I really love this piece. I could spend hours of this piece. It's like at one level I can see this forest and all of the brown lines that you talked about today as being trees. And then as I go into it and beyond the trees, see these spirits, these spirit people in the forest. So for me, this has evoked so many different thoughts and different feelings each time that I've looked at this piece. And then lastly, I would say is like, which was one of the questions, what do we think, how different would it look if we rotated it to the left, or even to the right? It doesn't, and put it on the vertical instead of on the horizontal. And what do you think would the narration?
It would become a ladder, I think, wouldn't it?
I don't know, because we didn't do that.
But let's not forget about the triangles too. There's more of the triangles.
Yeah, for me, I really love this because it's one of those ones where you can do this sort of play with your eyes, where so initially I looked at this as this is a red background, right, with these brown vertical lines and blue and white circular parts. But if you kind of change your focus and instead use the negative space, think of like the brown verticals with red teeth on the sides, almost like saw blades. And then everything else gets pushed to the background. So you can do one of those sort of fun visual games where you completely change your perspective on what's forward and what's back, which I think which makes this piece fun as well.
We have a couple more minutes. It's amazing. Folks have stayed. It's so great. Thank you for staying, because we could be here for another hour or two. We enjoy this very much. Let's listen to this.
Yeah, and this is also a really beautiful piece. This is from Algeria, from the Emzab Valley in Algeria, and these would have been made by the Berber women. And typically, what they would do is they would give this. Sorry, this isn't my saying this, but they would give it to their male children as a gift, or to their when the men got married, this would be given as a gift to the males of the family. And it's just a really beautiful, you can see it's a completely square pattern, right? But apparently the way they set these looms up, they can do these very, very textured and difficult concentrated patterns using a typical loom from that area, and the motifs, you know, could depend on what's in the local environment, or, you know, something that was in their daily life, or including some of their personal beliefs. And we talked about this earlier, that the wearer could be protected from the evil eye with the wearing of this. So, you know, it has a very important role, a ceremonial role. It's not, I don't think this is something that you'd be, you know, wearing to go down to Safeway in, but, you know, it's really these beautiful patterns. And, you know, if you look at each vertical line, it has these really interesting, like for me, I see W's on the one on the far right, you know, just almost like a series of W's, you know. And then if you look at the next row over, there are completely different designs that are filled with points more than anything else. And again, that's part of that loom process where they would make this kind of cloth. And then you have these, you know, I don't know, Lego type pieces, you know, in the center. You know, you have all these different textures, and I'm not talking about the texture that you would feel from the pattern. It's really the texture that you would see with your eye. Very, very complex weaving.
Yeah, I wanted to just add to that in terms of, you know, one of the things when I was looking at this, you know, because they're calling it a tunic tapestry. And so, you know, for me, tapestry often comes to mind something you would put on the wall. But this is, you know, something that somebody would wear. And so it made me wonder, well, how big is this thing? You know, relook at that. And it's about 3.5 feet by 3 feet.
Oh.
And so, you know, that's a sizable garment. And so if you're wearing it for a festive occasion and that it's wool, and all of this intricacy yet again, you know, I think for me, it just keeps coming back to the love and how the love gets expressed in the making of it and the giving of it, and that being part of the festive ceremony from, you know, and then right down the edges that I see on the left-hand side of this picture as I'm looking at the screen. And I think, Dimitri, you brought this up, is like, it looks like a cowrie shell. You know, and again, bringing that, you know, bringing the cowrie shells, which again has become a very iconic symbol and shape for us, being down the sides. And, you know, it made me just wonder, aside from the love that's been woven into this, what else is woven in for protection as well. So those were my
thank you, Remy. Yeah, go ahead, Charlie.
Well, I was just going to say, there's a question from Sherry that, you know, whether or not that's a zipper in the center. And I can't tell, to tell you the truth. You know, Dimitri, who's so good at research, says that the zipper was made in the 1890s. All that this says is it's a 19th century piece. So we don't know, you know, when that would have been in the 19th century, you know, or certainly could have been perhaps added on later. I don't really know if that, you know, unfortunately we don't know a lot about these pieces. You know, this particular piece comes from the British Museum. And
I think in terms of this piece, in looking at some of the curators' notes, they didn't mention that, and there's a lot of other things that they do mention. And I tend to think if a zip or a zipper, as you guys call it, had been added, I think they would have said, or if it was
mentioned,
they would have mentioned it, because I think it would have made it such a different use and a different thing that they wouldn't have been able to help but, knowing the British, they wouldn't have been able to help but mention.
And there's no Velcro involved in any of these pieces, thankfully.
and then Remy, also, just like I was hoping you would also talk about wool.
Oh, definitely, we'll talk about wool.
Fiber person.
The other thing, as I was reading about this, they were talking about some of the warp and the weft. So in terms of when you are weaving, whether you weave this way or this way, and I have to check my notes, but the warp is up and down, and the weft is horizontal. So when you take the yarn this way, and when you take it this way, one stabilizes the other and keeps it in place. And so I think in terms of weaving wool, one of the things they were talking about was the herringbone. And that is something that we know today when we say herringbone tweed. And it's a pattern, a repeated pattern of like a zigzag. And so I was really interested to see, you know, the how far back that term was living before it got to modern day tweed, that it was already in, of course, we know, in our culture. And yes, and the other thing I wanted to say about this is that, you know, it is said that it's a tunic in the archives, and I think just to acknowledge Aswan's research on this, and it's called a gandrura, and so, which is the actual name of the tunic rather than just calling it a tunic, because I think, again, using the word tunic makes it sound, or tapestry makes it kind of makes it sound ordinary. And this is actually a ceremonial festive piece. And, you know, there's obviously had, I don't know if there's any knitters or weavers out there, but months and days, you're probably dyeing your colors that you want and weaving the colors that you know. And I think any artist, whatever art form, knows the painstaking, you know, engagement and the time that you put into the process. So I just wanted to acknowledge that too.
Yeah, and
Thank you, Remy.
Sherry, bouncing off of Rodney's joke, says that the Metropolitan Opera has an amazing costume department. They have a no Velcro policy, which I guess that wouldn't work on Saturday Night Live, but I guess it works at the Metropolitan Opera.
Bravo.
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll close out with one 30-second song with a piece, and we invite you to join us again in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much for joining us today on Facebook and on Zoom. Such great discussion and really great music. I think we should do this again when we pair art with music.
Yeah,
all right,
I
this
loved all
last
the
piece.
comments.
Yeah, yes, thank you. And so we will just listen to this music. We won't be talking, listen to this music and experience this art, and we'll close out our discussion for today.